At 73, I finally understood that kindness can become a quiet way of abandoning yourself. For most of my life, I believed being a good person meant saying yes, staying patient, forgiving quickly, and making room for everyone else's needs. I thought kindness meant answering the telephone even when I was exhausted. I thought it meant lending money I could not comfortably lose. I thought it meant keeping the peace when someone had clearly crossed a line. I thought it meant smiling through disappointment so no one else would feel uncomfortable. But there is a kind of kindness that does not create love. It creates entitlement. It teaches people that your time is always available, your forgiveness is automatic, and your feelings can be ignored because you will remain gentle no matter what they do. That kind of kindness slowly destroys your peace. I did not understand this when I was younger. Back then, I wanted to be known as dependable. I wanted family members to say they could always count on me. I wanted friends to think of me as patient, generous, and understanding. And for many years, they did. But no one saw what happened after I helped everyone else. No one saw me sitting alone, tired and resentful. No one saw the worry after I gave away money I needed. No one heard the conversations I replayed at night because I had allowed someone to speak to me disrespectfully. No one knew how often my kindness was driven by fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being called selfish. Fear of losing people. Fear of growing old and being left alone. So I kept giving. I kept forgiving. I kept making excuses for people who rarely made an effort to protect my heart. At 73, I realized that kindness without boundaries is not always kindness. Sometimes it is self-betrayal. Old age teaches you quietly. It does not always change your life through dramatic events. Sometimes it teaches you through a tired body, a silent house, an unanswered message, or the strange relief you feel when someone cancels plans. That relief tells you something. It may tell you that a relationship has become a duty. It may tell you that your yes is no longer honest. It may tell you that you have been giving from guilt instead of love. The first hard lesson I learned was that saying yes when you want to say no creates hidden resentment. For years, I believed resentment was caused by ungrateful people. Sometimes it is. But sometimes resentment begins when we agree to something we never truly wanted to do. I remember being asked to host a large family gathering. I was already tired. My body was not as strong as it once had been, and I knew the preparation would take several days, but everyone expected me to agree. "You always bring the family together," they said. "You are so good at these things. We would not know what to do without you." Those words sounded like appreciation, but they also placed a responsibility on me. I smiled and said yes. Then I spent 2 days shopping, preparing food, cleaning the house, and worrying whether everything would be good enough. On the day of the gathering, people arrived, ate, laughed, and enjoyed themselves. I was glad to see them together, but I was also watching the dishes pile up. I noticed who offered to help and who disappeared when the work began. By the time everyone left, I could barely stand comfortably. I sat in the quiet kitchen and felt angry, not only with them, with myself. They had asked, I had agreed, I had hoped someone would notice that I was tired without my having to say it. I had hoped my silence would somehow communicate what my mouth refused to admit. That is where many of us make the mistake. We say yes, then punish others in our hearts for believing us. An honest no may disappoint someone for a moment. A dishonest yes can make you resent them for months. After that gathering, I began practicing a different answer. I cannot host this time. The first time I said it, I felt guilty. I wanted to add 10 explanations. I wanted to describe my tiredness, my responsibilities, and every reason my refusal was justified. But a boundary becomes weaker when we present it as a case that others are allowed to judge. So I kept it simple. I cannot host this time. Someone else arranged the gathering, the family survived, and I learned that I was not responsible for holding everything together. If you remember nothing else, remember this: kindness should be chosen freely. When your yes comes from fear, it is not generosity. It is surrender. The second lesson was that some people do not appreciate kindness. They become accustomed to it. At first, your help feels special. Then it becomes expected. You drive someone to an appointment once, and they are grateful. You do it every week, and soon they assume you are available. You lend money during a difficult month, and they promise to repay you. You help again and again, and eventually they stop asking whether you can afford it. They simply assume you will find a way. I used to believe that if I kept being generous, people would eventually become generous with me. That is not always how human nature works. Some people respond to kindness with gratitude. Others respond by asking for more. There was someone in my life who called whenever a problem needed solving. Sometimes the problem was serious. Often it was simply inconvenient for them. Because I was retired, they assumed I had unlimited time. They would say, "You're not doing anything today, are you?" That question bothered me. A quiet day is not an empty day. Rest is not nothing. Reading is not nothing. Sitting peacefully in your own home is not an invitation for someone else to fill your time with their responsibilities. But I did not say that. I kept helping. Then one day, I was the one who needed assistance. It was not a large request. I needed someone to accompany me while I handled a difficult task. The person who had relied on me so often said they were too busy. Their refusal was not cruel. They had their reasons, but it forced me to see the imbalance clearly. I had made myself constantly available to someone who saw my time as less valuable than theirs. That realization was painful, but the hardest lesson came later. I understood that they had not created the pattern alone. I had helped build it by never allowing my time to have limits. People learn how to treat us partly by what we repeatedly accept. That does not mean we are responsible for another person's selfishness. It means we are responsible for what access they continue to receive. I stopped answering every request immediately. I began saying, "Let me think about it." That small sentence changed my life. It gave me time to ask whether I truly wanted to help, whether I had the energy, and whether helping would create unnecessary dependence. Kindness does not mean making every problem your responsibility. Sometimes the kindest thing is allowing another adult to solve their own difficulty. The third lesson was that being understanding does not require tolerating disrespect. I have always tried to see the reasons behind people's behavior. Perhaps they were stressed. Perhaps they had been hurt. Perhaps they did not know how to communicate. Perhaps their childhood had taught them to protect themselves with anger. Understanding these things can soften the heart. But understanding someone's pain does not require offering your heart as the place where they release it. For years, I excused harsh words because I knew the person speaking them was struggling. I allowed raised voices because they were under pressure. I ignored insults because they had experienced disappointment. I told myself, they do not really mean it. But repeated disrespect leaves a mark, even when you understand where it comes from. Some people love you, but they do not know how to protect your heart. You can recognize their wounds without allowing them to wound you. I once had a conversation with a family member who was upset about a decision I had made. They interrupted me, mocked my reasoning, and raised their voice. I stayed calm. I listened. I tried to explain. The more patient I became, the more aggressive they became. They mistook my calmness for permission. Eventually, I said, I am willing to discuss this, but I will not continue while you speak to me this way. They accused me of being too sensitive. That phrase had controlled me for years. I did not want to be too sensitive. I wanted to be mature, patient, and forgiving. So I had accepted things that hurt me deeply. But sensitivity is not always weakness. Sometimes it is your inner self warning you that something is wrong. I ended the conversation. Later, when we were both calmer, we spoke again. This time, I did not pretend the disrespect had never happened. Kindness that avoids truth is not peace. It is delay. If someone repeatedly wounds you, your understanding will not change them unless they are willing to examine themselves. Compassion may explain their behavior. It does not excuse it. You can say, I know you are hurting, but you may not hurt me. That is not cruelty. That is self-respect. The fourth lesson was painful because it involved guilt. Many kind people are controlled by guilt long before anyone openly manipulates them. We carry memories of mistakes we made as parents, partners, siblings, or friends. We remember the times we were impatient. We remember the years when work took too much of our attention. We remember words we wish we could retrieve. Then, when someone asks too much from us, the guilt whispers, "You owe them." I spent years trying to repay emotional debts that had no clear ending. If one of my children was disappointed with me, I immediately remembered every mistake I had made while raising them. If a relative asked for help, I remembered times when I had not been available. If someone accused me of being selfish, I searched my entire life for evidence that they might be right. Guilt made my boundaries disappear, and some people knew exactly where to press. They would bring up the past whenever I said no in the present. I might say, I cannot help financially this time. They would answer, you were never there when I needed you. Suddenly, the conversation was no longer about the current request. It had become a trial of my whole life. So I explained. I apologized. I gave in. But an old mistake does not entitle someone to unlimited control over your future. You can take responsibility without accepting permanent punishment. You can apologize sincerely without spending the rest of your life proving that you are sorry. I learned to separate regret from manipulation. When someone brought up the past during an unrelated boundary, I began saying, I am willing to discuss what happened, but it does not change my decision today. That sentence was difficult at first. It felt cold, but it was honest. The past deserves a truthful conversation. It should not become a weapon used whenever someone wants access to your time, money, or energy. Regret should make you wiser. It should not make you easy to control. The fifth lesson was that kindness can become a performance when you are afraid of what people will say. I used to care deeply about being seen as a good person. I wanted people to describe me as generous. I wanted family members to say I never turned anyone away. I wanted to be remembered as someone who always helped. There is nothing wrong with wanting to live honorably. But when your goodness depends on other people's approval, you begin performing kindness even when your heart is empty. You give because you want to protect your image. You forgive quickly because you do not want to look bitter. You keep people close because you fear others will judge you for walking away. You remain silent because you want to appear peaceful. But appearing peaceful and feeling peaceful are not the same thing. I once continued a friendship long after trust had disappeared. The person often shared private things I had told them. They criticized other people constantly, and I knew that when I was absent, I probably became part of the same conversation. I no longer felt safe around them. Still, I remained close. Why? Because we had known each other for years. Because others expected us to stay friends. Because I did not want to be the person who ended the relationship. So I smiled through conversations that left me drained. I told myself I was being loyal. In truth, I was afraid of being misunderstood. The older I get, the less I explain myself to people who only hear what they want. I did not create a dramatic ending. I simply reduced the access. I stopped sharing personal matters. I stopped accepting every invitation. I remained polite, but I no longer offered closeness where trust had been damaged. Some relationships do not need a final argument. They need a different distance. Privacy is not bitterness. It is wisdom. Kindness does not require everyone to remain close to you. You can wish someone well without giving them a front row seat in your life. The sixth lesson was that always rescuing people can prevent them from growing. This truth was difficult because helping others had become part of my identity. When someone struggled, I moved quickly. I offered advice before they asked. I solved problems before they experienced the consequences. I stepped between people and the discomfort that might have taught them something. I believed I was protecting them. Sometimes I was, but sometimes I was protecting them from lessons they needed to learn. There was a family member who repeatedly mishandled money. Each time they faced a shortage, I helped. I told myself the situation was temporary. I gave advice, but I also removed the consequence. Because I always rescued them, nothing changed. Eventually, I realized my kindness was helping the pattern continue. The next time they asked, I did not immediately provide the money. I listened. I asked what steps they planned to take. I offered encouragement, but I did not solve everything. They were angry. They said I had changed. They were right. I had changed from being their rescuer to being someone who cared without taking over. That is a painful change for both people. The helper loses the feeling of being needed. The other person loses an easy solution. But love should not keep someone permanently dependent. Help should restore strength when possible, not replace it. Before helping now, I ask myself whether I am offering support or preventing responsibility. Will this help the person stand again, or will it teach them to keep falling in my direction? There are emergencies when we should step forward without hesitation. There are moments when generosity can save someone from great suffering, but not every difficulty is an emergency. Sometimes discomfort is a teacher. Do not steal every lesson from the people you love. The seventh lesson was that peace sometimes requires disappointing good people, not only difficult ones. This surprised me. I thought boundaries were needed only with selfish or disrespectful people. But even kind, loving people can ask for more than you are able to give. A caring friend may want more of your time than you have energy for. An adult child may want you to visit more often. A relative may sincerely need help at a time when you are already overwhelmed. Their request may be reasonable. Your refusal may also be reasonable. This is where kindness becomes mature. You stop searching for someone to blame. You accept that two good people can have conflicting needs. I remember a close friend asking me to attend an event that mattered deeply to them. I wanted to support them, but the journey was long, and I had not been feeling strong. The old version of me would have gone anyway. I would have smiled through the exhaustion and paid for it for several days afterwards. This time, I said I could not attend. My friend was disappointed. They did not attack me or pressure me, but I could hear the sadness in their voice. I almost changed my mind. Then I remembered that another person's disappointment does not automatically mean I have done something wrong. I sent a thoughtful message. I called them afterwards. I showed care in a way I could manage. The friendship survived. Kind people can survive honest boundaries. Healthy relationships make room for both people's limits. You cannot avoid disappointing everyone. If you try, you will eventually disappoint yourself. And that disappointment becomes bitterness. The final lesson was the one that brought me the most peace. True kindness includes kindness towards yourself. For most of my life, I placed myself at the end of the line. Everyone else's tiredness mattered before mine. Everyone else's feelings seemed more urgent. Everyone else's needs appeared more legitimate. I thought self-sacrifice was proof of love, but a person who is constantly depleted cannot remain genuinely kind. Eventually, the smile becomes forced. The help becomes resentful. The patience becomes silence, filled with anger. You may continue doing kind things while your heart grows hard. That is not the life I wanted. So I began offering myself the same consideration I had always given others. Before agreeing to something, I asked, "Do I truly have the strength for this?" Before forgiving, I asked, "Has this person taken responsibility, or am I rushing because conflict makes me uncomfortable?" Before sharing personal information, I asked, "Has this person handled my trust with care?" Before inviting someone into my home, I asked, "Does their presence bring warmth or tension?" Before lending money, I asked, "Can I afford to lose this without damaging my own security or peace?" These questions did not make me selfish. They made my kindness more honest. Now, when I help, I do it more freely. When I say yes, I mean yes. When I forgive, I do not pretend trust has already been restored. When I say no, I try to say it without anger or shame. A boundary does not need to be cruel. It can be spoken gently. I cannot do that. I am not comfortable with this. I need time to think. I will not continue this conversation if I am being disrespected. That information is private. These are not weapons, they are doors. They allow love to enter while keeping harm outside. At 73, I no longer want to be known as the person who tolerated everything. I want to be kind, but I also want to be truthful. I want to forgive, but I do not want to forget every lesson. I want to support people, but I will not carry adults who refuse to stand. I want family in my life, but not at the cost of peace inside my home. A quiet life is not an empty life. There is a deep comfort in knowing that your kindness is no longer being used against you. There is dignity in giving because you choose to, not because guilt forced your hand. There is peace in understanding that someone can be disappointed with you and still survive. There is freedom in accepting that some people will call you selfish the moment you stop sacrificing yourself for their convenience. Let them speak. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your growth. That does not mean your growth is wrong. Sometimes dignity means walking away without proving your pain. Sometimes love means helping less. Sometimes forgiveness means releasing anger while keeping distance. Sometimes kindness means telling the truth that another person does not want to hear. And sometimes the kindest answer you can give yourself is no. I spent years trying to protect everyone else from discomfort. Now I understand that discomfort is not always harm. Someone may feel uncomfortable when you set a boundary. They may feel disappointed when you refuse. They may feel offended when you keep something private. Those feelings belong to them. You can care about their feelings without surrendering your decision. You are responsible for being respectful. You are not responsible for making every person happy with your limits. At 73, I realize being too kind can destroy your peace. Not because kindness is weak. Real kindness is one of the strongest things a person can offer. But kindness without wisdom becomes permission. Kindness without truth becomes performance. Kindness without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Kindness without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. I still believe in generosity. I still believe in patience. I still believe people deserve compassion, forgiveness, and another chance when their actions show genuine change. But I no longer believe that being good requires me to be endlessly available. My time matters, my energy matters, my home matters, my feelings matter, the years I have left matter, and yours do too. Be kind, but do not disappear inside your kindness. Give, but do not empty yourself for people who never ask whether you need anything. Forgive, but pay attention to patterns. Listen, but do not allow every troubled person to turn your heart into a place where they leave their anger. Help, but do not rescue people from every consequence. Love, but do not use love as a reason to accept disrespect. Your peace is not selfish. It is something you have spent a lifetime earning. Protect it gently. Protect it without hatred. Protect it without needing everyone to understand. The people who truly love you may need time to adjust, but they will learn to respect the healthier version of your kindness. The people who only loved what you provided may step away. Let that loss teach you rather than break you. At my age, I would rather have a few honest relationships than a house full of people who expect me to betray myself to keep them comfortable. I would rather give one sincere yes than 10 resentful ones. I would rather be misunderstood for protecting my peace than praised for quietly destroying it. If you have spent your life being too kind, Share your age in the comments and tell me when you realized that kindness also needs boundaries.